Girl Scout Troop 1339, who we just completed a tour. I'm going to do something just a little different tonight. We always start off the Common Council meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're actually going to start off the planning meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance once we start. So, okay? We will now call the November 8th, 2022 Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Grillo here.
Pachinski here.
Lorick here. Kavich here.
Oldani here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
Everybody, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Girls, would you start us off, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will say that was probably the most enthusiastic pledge we've ever had in this council chambers, so congratulations to you all. That will get us to the approval of minutes of October 25th, 2022. If everybody please take a look. And when you're satisfied there's no errors, omissions, or discussions, motion please.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of October 25th, 2022.
Lorick seconds.
Roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we get a second? Oh, okay. Roll call, beginning with Christine.
Grillo, aye.
Pachinski, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Oldani abstains.
Chandler abstains.
Got it. Next, report on recent Common Council actions. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Common Council approved the following. A resolution approving a certified survey map submitted by the Bryan Building Corporation for the properties of 7433 South 10th Street and 7300 South 13th Street. An ordinance amending the conditions and restrictions in ordinance number 2762 to exclude a portion of the property at 7433 South 10th Street, which is Lot 2 of a CSM to be recorded. Approved an ordinance rezoning a property, or a portion of the property at 7300 South 13th Street, which is part of Lot 2 of a CSM to be recorded, from B3 Office and Professional Business to it should be M1 Manufacturing. Approved an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for an outdoor recreation facility, private playground on the property at 150 West Forest Hill Avenue, which is Lot 1 of a proposed CSM. And approved an ordinance amending Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10 of Chapter 17 Zoning Code of the Municipal Code. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Now that will bring us to item number 5, and that is a recent report on the Board of Housing and Zoning Appeal actions, and there were none to date. Item 6, review and discuss the quarterly reports on the recent Park and Recreation Commission actions. Next report we will get, I believe that's our last meeting of the year, December 13th, 2022. To lead us into new business, item 7A. It is a conditional use permit amendment, and it is for a contractor shop office contracting yard on a portion of property at 8940 South 27th Street. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a conditional use permit amendment for an existing conditional use permit on the property. Plan commissioners may recall, well, some of you may recall, that this property was subject to a conditional use permit for a trucking business, and subsequent to that, there was a request in 2019 and approved in August of that year, a request for a contractor shop and yard. It was basically a laydown area with a little bit of the interior of the building devoted to a telecom contractor. And that approval was good for 3 years from the date of approval by the Common Council. So that expired in August of this year, and they're back before you to ask for an extension of their conditional use approval to remain at that location. So this is for a contractor's shop and office as well as a contractor's yard. They are two separate zoning district categories. Will note that although the Common Council did approve the recent zoning text amendments to allow for those uses in this district, that's not yet effective. It will be effective in the next couple of weeks, so it will be effective prior to any hearing date, should the Plan Commission recommend this for Common Council approval. There are no changes to the original request or to the site for this proposal before you tonight. It is for Telcom Construction. The office is going to be used as their headquarters and also their office for their field operations and kind of basically their dispatch area. Same hours as previous, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is similar to what the trucking hours are. The contractor's yard is on the east and south, as you can kind of see from the site plan that is on the screen. There were additional site plans that were included in your packets. So this is just a general idea of where the existing uses are, both in the building and on the property. The uses that are outside are actually behind a fence, so these are things that cannot be seen from 27th Street. The kind of materials that are going to be stored outside as part of the contractor's yard include spools of cable and housing, vehicles, handholds, telephone poles, and pedestals, same as what was there previously. And while there have been no complaints that have been fielded by staff to date, we will note that there are landscape plans that were approved by the Director of Community Development that were not fully installed. We did kind of verify what's been out there. And there's a few things that are missing, mostly for the parking lot screening items. So we will work with the landowner in order to make sure that landscape plan is fully installed. Or if there's going to be an issue with that this year, we'll go through the escrow process as per our internal review policy. Staff is recommending that if the Plan Commission wishes to recommend Common Council approval of this item, that the contractor's shop, office, and yard be allowed for another 3 years. If you turn to the conditions and restrictions that were included in your packet, you'll note that this is the exact same set of conditions and restrictions. The two things that have been added are section 2E on page 2, which is requiring that landscaping to be installed per the policy and per the landscape plan. And then the only other change would be on page 4 of 9, which is 8, duration of conditional use permit. And that says the conditional use approval for one contractor's office, shop, and yard with outdoor storage is limited in duration to 3 years from the date of issuance, which would be the date of Common Council approval if this moves forward. And the only other correction would be under 6, identifying that there are new sections of code to reference when talking about off-street parking requirements. With that, there is a suggested motion on the screen for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Would the applicant like to say anything or just kind of wait on questions from commission? Thank you. Okay, let's start off. Christine?
Okay, I actually have a question. I'm not sure if it's to you or to Carrie. Was there any ever complaint about any truck movement, truck interruption, delays, anything from that sort from your businesses?
Planning and zoning has not received any complaints to
Okay.
date.
All right, that's the only question I have. Thank you.
Vaughn?
No, I have nothing.
Ashley?
Nothing from engineering.
Greg?
Knowing that there weren't really any complaints, I don't have an issue with it. Being that it's been 3 years and they haven't fully developed the landscaping, with this new addition that says that it shall be in place no later than June 1st, 2023. What's, I guess, the penalty if they don't install it by then?
We have a requirement that if the landscaping will not be in during the planting season, so basically through the beginning of this month, honestly, that they provide an escrow in the amount of 1.5 times the cost of the landscaping items plus installation. That has to be submitted to us along with a quote from the landscaper with the approved plan on file. We keep that until the landscaping has been installed per the plan. We confirm that it's been installed once we get a notice from them that it has been completed. And if it hasn't, then we draw upon that escrow.
Okay, so we would just put the plants in, use their money.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Don?
No questions.
Fred?
Yeah, do you have any problem meeting that requirement of June 1st, 2023?
Not at all. And, you know, to be honest, I mean, I'm willing to meet everybody there so they can show me what need to be adjusted or addressed as far as the landscaping and, you know, and even if I need to put down like $10,000 deposit to, you know, to you guys to really make sure that, you know, everything is up to date and everything's up to code, you know, I don't have a problem with it, so.
Mr. Radetta, could you just give your name and address for the record, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Dragan Radeta. I'm the owner of the property, 7228 South 27th Street, Oak Creek.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Good catch.
Thank you.
Chauncey?
No questions, thank you.
Greg pretty much covered mine, and I'm satisfied with that answer. Condition 8 concerning hazardous. Any, Assistant Chief Havey, any concerns from fire indicating no? Okay. I'm sure it'll all be done to code. We're pretty strict about that. Just want to double check on that. So, other than that, I have no questions either. So, if there's no further discussion, motion, please.
Seifert moves that the Planning Commission recommends that the Common Council approves a conditional use permit amendment to allow the contractor's shop, office, and contractor's yard on the property at 9840 South 27th Street after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions.
Anna seconds.
Roll call beginning with Dawn.
Grillo, aye. Shinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, I.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. That will get us to item 7B, Master Landscape Plan Review, submitted by Ryan Jansen Bruckner for Stonebrook on the park planned unit development on the portions of the property at 641 and 819R East Drexel Avenue. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Plan commissioners will recall that a plan unit development for this two-family residential development was approved in April of this year. So as part of that PUD, there was a requirement for a master landscape plan to be submitted for review and approval by the Plan Commission prior to submission of any permits and prior to any issuance of occupancy permits. That landscaping did need to be installed per the approved plans. So tonight we are going to be reviewing the plans for the private streetscapes, the individual home sites, and for the common areas of the PUD. I will note that the landscape plans that were submitted did actually include landscaping along the public portions of the right-of-way. We did submit it to DPW for their review. And per the development agreement, there is a requirement for the developer to provide a per tree fee with the DPW installing those trees. So those trees are not going to be necessary as they are presented. So they'll just have to work with the Department of Public Works to ensure that the plans are updated in accordance with those requirements. However, the landscaping that is proposed along the private portions, those are things that are going to be required to be included in this landscape plan, and those are the items that are before the Plan Commission this evening. One other note, there was a monument sign that was included in the landscape plans. However, the proposed sign was actually kind of designed per the previous zoning code. So there would need to be modifications or variances in order to approve that sign. So that's excluded from tonight's review. We are going to break up this landscape plan into 3 areas just for ease. Landscape plan area A, these are restricted to the individual home sites because the right-of-way is actually a public street. This is an extension of the public right-of-way. So those trees that are along the right-of-way are going to be whatever is required by DPW. What's on the screen right now is one of the 5 plans for the home sites showing the landscaping basically at the perimeter. So in this particular area, there is one recommendation that staff had, and that would be to include a hedgerow or in combination with a privacy fence along the north side of these properties, just to give a little bit more privacy to not only these new homes, but to the existing single-family residential homes to the north. In addition, we are recommending the same for the home site that is right on the border with the existing home site that is to the north of on the west side of the proposed road. Just gives it a little bit more separation, kind of gives a bit more privacy to all the individuals who are going to be living there, and gives a little bit of a notice of this is a different part of a subdivision that you're entering at this point. Landscape Area B, again, we are looking at the individual home sites. And Area C, this includes a partial of a private and public portion of the right-of-way and the individual home sites. And the unit plans, there are 5 types of units that are going in, so there are 5 different foundation plans that are going to be going in. So that's what each of these unit plans incorporates. Staff have no concerns for the unit plans themselves. And with the understanding that staff is recommending that hedgerow or privacy fence being incorporated, there is a suggested motion in 2 parts with conditions for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Does the applicant want to say anything or just wait on questions? Chauncey, let's start on your end this time.
I do have a question for the applicant.
Name and address, please.
My name is Ryan Jansen, S98W33270 Genevieve Drive in McGuanago.
Could you provide your feedback on adding that hedgerow or privacy fence?
This is going to be a very nice development. It's not going to be an eyesore by any means, and I don't, it's nice and it's nice to separate, but I guess I don't know if I should be the one bearing all the cost of it. Nice idea, but I think maybe we talk to the neighbors, and if they want to share some of the costs, we'll put in some natural privacy, a natural privacy hedgerow there. So, I mean, you're asking if I kind of disagree with, forcing it on me, I guess I would say disagree with me having to bear all the cost of it. But I'm not, I guess, disagreeing with the idea of it as a whole.
So do you have any suggestions for another option?
I would have to look at what's out there. I think what's there, I mean, I think it's a pretty heavy tree line as it is. I mean, I think we would, honestly, if they don't, if we don't remove what's there, you'd just be putting a hedgerow up against kind of a tree line. I don't know if any of this stuff there is any good, if it's just weeds or, invasives or what, but I know there is some natural screening there already.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is that it, Chauncey?
Yes.
Fred?
No questions at this time.
Don?
No questions at this time.
Greg?
No questions. I agree with staff's recommendations.
Ashley?
No questions,
On?
I'm assuming we addressed this, but I know we talked all about it at length, about the garages and how much can be towards the road and what percentage of the house in the new rules, and I assume that these all meet those standards?
That would be something that would be reviewed at a building permit level to make sure that it complies with the PUD requirements, but those standards were included as part of the PUD.
They do though, Don. We made sure when we designed the plans to make sure they met that new garage ordinance.
Christine?
Yes, actually, I did not understand Chelsea's question in the answer.
So
What
if you look
was
at what's on the screen here, they're asking me to put in essentially hedges or bushes along probably 500 feet property line to kind of screen the other people's houses from the new buildings that I'm building.
Okay, so between the new ones with each other or between the old ones and the new ones?
between the old ones and the new ones.
Okay. So, and there is no separation between the new ones as they are laid out as of today, just a blended backyard, like I see it today on the screen.
We'd have to pull up like the street map, but I know one of the neighbors had, when we first started the process, was asking about a fence, and I know from being out there, just being on the site, that there is some, aside from the Eden property, which is on the west, I know there is some natural screening there already. I don't know how pretty it is, but I know that there's barns and stuff that might have grown up on the fence over time, and it's kind of filled in. So, I mean, there is some screening there. But to what extent, I guess I'm not quite sure.
And the reason why I'm asking, I've seen it in different areas when some people choose like metal fencing versus natural fencing.
Sure.
It just becomes a mess and it's not really aesthetic.
No,
So
no
I
fencing.
don't know if this is something that can be enforced. It can be one of the regulation. I don't know. But
So staff's recommendation is to incorporate either a hedgerow or a decorative fence. And decorative fence would be something like wood or, there are various materials that are allowed per the code.
Okay.
And if there are any materials for screening or if there are any vegetative materials that are going to be remaining on the properties in order to maintain that screening, those should be incorporated into the landscape plan. That would be staff's recommendation.
okay, and the public landscape plans, how is this who's going to be maintaining that and the cost of the maintenance?
So the proposal that we have in the landscape plans here included trees that we've submitted to the Department of Public Works. And rather than this particular plan being implemented, there is a policy that the developer pay a per tree fee, and the DPW will install and maintain those street trees along the public right-of-way. Along the private right-of-way, however, the landscape plan would then govern, and those trees and those decorative elements would be required to be installed and maintained by the developer and eventually the homeowners association.
Thank you.
So if we really kind of think about this, I understand these sort of ideas of screening when you're going from different zoning districts, say like a commercial or an industrial that, meets up to a residential. But imagine kind of, if you would, two rectangular parcels of land. This one has a cul-de-sac right down the middle with lots that back up here, and then this guy wants to put a cul-de-sac here, and we have lots that back up to each other now, residential to residential. I mean, would it be a requirement of two residential neighborhoods to then, it could be 1,000 feet to screen that entire 1,000 feet of property line between the backyards? I mean, that's effectively what I'm being asked to do, and I don't know if that would be asked in a situation like that, like a residential to residential. I think that, those sort of landscape screenings are more geared towards, like I said, a commercial or an industrial district against a residential.
Okay. Kind of comes down to me, the beautiful plan, really is, and I get your concern, I get where staff's coming from. Not only is it an initial cost, an added cost, it's the long-term maintenance of this thing that's really the burden going forward. Probably on homeowners, to tell you the truth. I just can't get a good mental picture of what's there screening-wise now. Does the land change topography at all? Can you do any type of berm thing? Probably not. Stormwater that's probably headed to that pond, I would think.
Berm would probably be a little bit, one, you probably don't have enough room, and two, that's probably more overkill than just asking for a fence or some screening by vegetation. And really, with the way that these are laid out, there would not be enough room for a berm.
There's a couple spots maybe, but maybe half you could and half you couldn't.
I'm not getting a good distance. I know you mentioned 500 feet at one point and 1,000. Just taking the west side properties, how long is that one on? You said it was the Eden, that abuts the Eden property?
That's 130, just on the Eaton property. I was saying it's about 500 on this plan total.
Oh, 500 total.
That was my general description of,
Okay.
a different residential scenario that,
A decorative fence is definitely less maintenance. Could it be broken up where you do 12 feet of fence, a tree, another 12 feet of fence, so forth, in combination?
I've seen like some split rail. You do like an evergreen and then a chunk of split rail fence. Doesn't really achieve a screen though, I suppose.
It doesn't, no, it doesn't.
I mean, is this something maybe that we have the landscape designer here kind of look into, and can we reword the condition?
I mean, is it possible to do, and just kind of bear with me, I'm just kind of spitballing, and I really don't like to do it up here. I'd rather leave it to staff, but if you did a landscape plan instead of the whole way, just the length of the buildings where they're affected, so effectively you'd probably have three, I guess you'd have four, but they wouldn't go the whole length. They would just essentially go wherever the window view is to the back of the buildings. Patio doors. You know what I'm getting at?
I do. And I don't think we're breaking ground this year. I mean, we could hold this over and we could have the landscape guy go out there, the architect here go out there and take a look at it and kind of actually propose something instead we're just.
I would prefer that, make sure you're satisfied, because again, I get it, it's an added cost burden and we're in times.
It's preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I hear you, but I like the plan, but I do understand. I think there's only about 3 homes really affected. What's on the far west side, Carrie, going to the existing neighborhood?
That's a recreation trail.
Yeah, that's that huge hill that goes up.
Oh, okay, so there ain't a problem going that way.
Dave doesn't care. He doesn't need any trees on his side.
So, okay, how can we best do that to move forward with what we have, but continue to work on that with the landscaper?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to just holding it over to next month or something. Hold the whole thing over, Carrie? I don't know what's easiest for you.
We can hold the item. There's only one more meeting in the year, and that's December 13th, or we can hold it to the new year. We can just hold the item indefinitely until you want to come back. It's up to you. The only issue is we won't be able to have any building permits approved until the landscaping plan is.
We're gonna do some pre-sales. I don't think we're gonna break ground until spring.
Well,
The other thing is if we held it, you could combine the two, because I believe you wanted to do a condo plat, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we could combine the two, or if they're not going to be, if the timing's just not going to be right, we can just hold the item. It really depends on what your plans are, what your landscape architect is able to do in terms of going out there and making a definitive decision on what's something that could be.
Maybe I'll have them include some pictures, and I mean, we've already missed the submittal, or it's going to be soon for next month. So I mean, we're looking at January regardless, I would say.
Okay, we can hold it to the first meeting in January.
I do appreciate the cooperation. It's more important to make sure the parties are all right, not only the city, but you as well.
Yep.
And it just gets messy when we start cutting it off.
Right. Or putting something in here that is open to interpretation.
Correct.
So the first meeting is January 10th.
What's the? Okay. Thanks, guys. See you in a couple
Okay,
months.
put it. Oh, yep, thank you.
So we'll need a motion and a second to hold to January 10th.
But I have a question for Carrie. On number 4, on the wording, so when I look back at this in a few weeks, are you saying that, because in there it doesn't say it must be installed by the owner, I'm just kind of trying to read this. Is that the implication there, that this is has to be installed by the owner?
Well, it's the property owner who currently owns the property on which we are asking for them to install the hedgerows, so the developer. We can't ask for the neighboring property owners to install a fence or landscaping on property that they don't own. So we're asking for the landscape plan to be updated so that the landscaping and/or the fence is on the developer's property, on the development side. Now, of course,
But-
the neighbors could put up a fence or a hedgerow on their property if they wanted to as well.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, but why? I mean, these are two residential properties, and I know when we have like an industrial building going up, and we go round and round about how many trees and berms, and that's understandable for noise, looks. I don't remember this ever coming through like this before, and I
There
could be
aren't
wrong.
many subdivisions where we have, well, first of all, we don't have many subdivisions. Second of all, this is really just trying to kind of give a bit of privacy and delineation of the yards for both parties. And that's why it was a suggested motion. This is because the properties are kind of close together in terms of the building to the property line. That was why staff was making the recommendation. It doesn't have to be a fence. It doesn't have to be just landscaping. It could be a combination of the two. But again, it's up to the Plan Commission if you want to make that a requirement or not.
Okay, I have more questions, but I don't think right now is the time to ask them, since we're just holding this over anyway.
Oh, we'll need you on the mic, Ryan.
Next generation of plans, if we can all kind of agree on what we'd like to see, maybe.
All right, well, I guess I'm inclined to agree with the applicant a little bit where, why is this his responsibility to pay to have all this put in?
It's part of the development. It's part of why we are requiring them to put in any landscaping for the development. So again, it is a recommendation. It is a recommendation that the Plan Commission can consider. It's a recommendation that the Plan Commission can eliminate. The reason that we ask for it is because in certain circumstances where we have buildings that are quite close to the property line, it helps to have a delineation. It also has a bit of privacy. It helps to enhance the area with some landscaping. But ultimately, if the Plan Commission doesn't agree, the Plan Commission can eliminate that. And we do have buffer requirements, but it's less intensive in residential to residential.
Oh, okay. So this is more part of the whole landscape plan as a singled out, we need some privacy put in there.
It's a recommendation.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Any other further discussion? Christine?
Yes, I would just add, if I'm one of those homeowners or one of the buyers, and for consistency, I would like to have a consistency between all those homes, have the same privacy between all those fences, instead of me having one versus the neighbor having a different one. It's just going to make the whole community more appealing for the whole area, I guess. It will make sense to me to have the landscaping put this way, I guess.
The other option is to have that be part of the, I guess it's not homeowners association necessarily, as it would be a condo association. It could be that the condo association would have to apply for a fence in the future because it would be a common area. So if we don't include the requirement for them to put it in now, it would be the condo association that would have to apply for it in the future. And at that point, it wouldn't be a piecemeal home by home situation. It would have to be one of those where there would be some consistency in design and requirement for that, especially if it's going to be a property line fence. It wouldn't be in between the units. It would be on the property line itself.
Of course, I agree, but it has to also have restriction, like they cannot remove it if it goes from one owner or the other. So it has to go with other restrictions as well, correct?
That's why it would be the homeowners association, because that's considered common area.
Okay.
But that's part of condo documents that we haven't reviewed yet, so that would be at a future date.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay, seeing none, motion, and
Clerk moves to hold item 7B until the January 10th Plan Commission meeting.
Seifert seconds.
roll call, beginning with Ashley.
Lorik, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Okay, that will get us to item 7C, and that's a plan review, site, building, and related plans submitted by Caitlin LaJoy, Brian Builders Corporation for a multi-tenant industrial building on the portions of the properties at 7433 South 10th and 7300 South 13th Street. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm having a bit of an issue with my computer here. Just bear with me. There we go.
Hi, girls. Hope you had a good time.
The request is for a multi-tenant industrial speculative building on the property. It's a little under 134,000 square feet. This is part of a CSM that was recently approved by the Common Council. So this will be on Lot 2 of that CSM to be recorded. Plan commissioners will also remember that this is subject to a conditional use permit amendment, in which case the Lot 2 portion of the property was eliminated from the conditional use permit that is regulating the Go Right Way property. So a few things that we are going to be discussing this evening. Most of the items that we're going to be talking about are just going to be going in order from what was discussed in the staff report. So beginning with the building itself, we note that the building does not currently meet a wetland setback requirement, and that is per code. We have a 15-foot setback with a 5-foot undisturbed buffer. And the reason that we mention this is because while we do note that the applicant has submitted a wetland fill permit application to the Department of Natural Resources, that permit has not yet been issued. So until that DNR permit is issued, we do have a setback requirement. Additionally, we must have the entirety of the property shown on the plans, even if the portions of the property will not be developed. And we need to have those property lines shown to ensure that we are looking at all of the required elements and all of the setbacks. They also must show the wetlands and any portion of those wetlands that are going to be preserved and undisturbed, and the plans need to note that. That is particularly of note in the area that is in the green box on the screen. We do know that also access to 13th Street is the jurisdiction of Milwaukee County, so any access permits and approvals must be provided to the city. We have not received those as of yet. Turning now to parking, we do have a requirement in code for minimum parking requirements as well as maximum parking requirements. The minimum is 1 stall for every 1,500 square feet, and that comes out to a total of 89 minimum. Now the maximum is allowed 20% over the minimum, which would be 107 stalls, and the plans show over 130. So at this point, we are over the maximum allowed per code. Staff is recommending that the parking that is outlined in the black box on the screen in the northeast portion of the property be labeled and identified for future parking. And in that case, we would have a written request submitted to the Director of Community Development that includes the actual use and demand per code, requesting that those future stalls be approved and constructed at a later date so that we do not run afoul of the code requirements. We also have a code requirement that says that the full length of 13th Street is not that the parking lot, uninterrupted parking along the full frontage, is only allowed if there is no other possible configuration or orientation of the property in the building. So it will be up to the Plan Commission to determine whether or not the parking lot that is along essentially the full frontage of South 13th Street is acceptable. We do also recommend that the code requirement for bike parking be included in the revised plans, or that a request be submitted that bike parking is excluded. And that would be approved by either the Plan Commission or the Director of Community Development, but we do encourage those bicycle parking areas per code. Lastly, on the screen, we do have a purple box that outlines one of the locations of the trash enclosures, and these are things that have been in discussions with the applicants regarding location. This particular location either should be amended or that structure moved back in order to maintain the vehicular site distances. As it is right now, there would be conflicts potentially. Turning now to the fire department concerns that were submitted, we do have a few items to discuss, particularly with regard to the loading docks, which are on the east and highlighted in green. We do not have any truck or trailer parking stalls on this property, you will note. And there are no plans that we have seen, and there are no future plans for truck or trailer parking on the property. And right now I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Fire Chief Mike Havey to kind of go over those fire department concerns that were included in the staff report.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. A couple items that we wanted to just go over. One of them is the turning radius or access through the site. It's fairly limited in what the turntables that were presented. So that does concern us through the entire site with parking restrictions and the surface pavement to work with. That is one of the options would be to give us access around the entire building, but that would change a lot of the structure in itself. The other issue, probably more complex, is where the fire department connection is. So just a little background on what that component means to us for fire operations. So that's the connection we utilize to supplement the automatic suppression system. So the sprinkler system, on an operational basis, we need to access that and secure water supply. So the lane that's designated where that FTC connection is on the south east portion of the building where the sprinkler room is. Where that is located, our fire apparatus are going to be designated to spot that area and secure a water supply. So we have a large diameter hose that's going to be laid across where the closest hydrant is. So that limits our operational practices on the east side of the building. So that our aerial apparatus or any other suppression vehicles, tactical operations is limited because we won't be able to pass through. That's like an area that's really congested or restricted. So one of the options would be to relocate where that FTC location would be. Optimal would be on the side facing the west end of the building, would give us a little more room to access the FTC without congesting the rest of our operations. We've seen other sites that are similar to this size. One of the areas that we're not able to do is classify the hazard commodity because it's a spec building. We have no idea what could be going in there. So our operational and our priorities may be a little bit limited on what we speculate of what we would do, but we try to plan for maybe those worst case scenarios. So those two things, I think, we've worked with that applicant before in some other projects. We're able to come to some resolve. But I think these things we wanted to point out right away before any continuation of the project goes along. Any questions that I can answer?
Any
right now?
questions for Assistant Chief Havey? Not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on to the landscape plans, there are a few items that we need to address in these reviews, and that is one, the landscape plans that were submitted did not have labels. And while it's not a requirement for the individual landscape items to have labels on the plans, when we get into situations where we have these symbols just standing for the individual plantings, it becomes very cumbersome and very difficult to distinguish between what is considered a tree versus a bush versus a number of perennials or anything like that. So when we have landscape plans with dense landscaping like this, we ask for there to be labels so that we can ensure that the code requirements are met, particularly when it comes down to tree requirements in terms of caliper, number, spacing, and especially when we come to the tree inventory and replacement requirements. And also when it comes to screening materials, we need to make sure that the screening materials that are proposed are installed at the minimum and maximum heights per code to be most effective for their intended purpose. So one of the things that we need, of course, are the labels on the plans. We do need dimensions and planting depths for the landscape islands, and that's per code because there are minimum requirements for that as well. As far as the tree inventory and replacement plan is concerned, we did receive a tree inventory. However, we did not have anything noted on the landscape plans as to which trees in particular were being identified to fulfill those replacement requirements. There is a requirement for 3-to-1 for any viable tree that meets the minimum caliper requirement at it's essentially 4 foot off the ground. So those requirements need to be incorporated into the landscape plan so that we are fulfilling all of the portions of the landscape plans. And I will note, the reason that we are asking for those trees to be identified on the landscape plans themselves is because each individual portion of the landscape requirement, so each section, is considered a separate requirement. And you cannot have one section fulfill the requirements of another section in most cases. So that's why we're asking for that. And finally, with regard to the landscape plans, we do need to have a verification that the north side, which is highlighted in blue, meets the transition zone requirements to the property to the north, because that is an office zoning district and an office use going up against industrial. Turning now to the building itself, each elevation, the whole building is essentially primarily going to be constructed with painted insulated precast concrete wall panels. Little asterisk there because that was one of the items that was included in the text amendments that was recently approved by the Common Council, not yet effective. However, once that ordinance is published next week, it will be effective. So prior to permitting, there would be an allowance. So if the Plan Commission is comfortable understanding that that code section is approved, it's just not effective yet, that would be something that we would be looking at in terms of conditions. We have windows on basically every single elevation. Most of the windows are on the west and at the entries. We do have pre-finished metal canopies with recessed lights underneath them over the entryways for each of the items on the west. Where there are showing signs, now keep in mind the sign areas are just placeholders at this point. There is a need for a requirement for a master sign plan to be submitted at a later date. These are just considered placeholders. However, the building element where those signs are shown are metal panels. We do also require that the materials percentages per elevation be incorporated so that we can determine whether or not they meet code requirements. And there were a couple of recommendations in the staff report regarding the color palette, kind of recommending that there be more of a warm color palette and incorporating some of the elements specifically regarding the double hung windows, or I'm sorry, the double windows on the west to match on the north, kind of the address of the building to the development to the north of it, the office building, kind of bringing those west elevation elements to the north, kind of mimicking that, and the presentation to the north being a little bit more consistent with what's on the west. No mechanicals were identified. However, any mechanical unit, be it ground, building, or rooftop, those would have to be screened per code. So those would be elements that would have to be incorporated into revised plans. So just going quickly through the elevations, this is the north presentation again to that existing office complex. We're requesting that the windows that are similar on the west be incorporated on the north. East side is where the loading docks are presented, and they're actually facing interior to a portion of North Branch, so that's industrial to industrial. There is no transition zone requirement there. And the elevations on the south, no concerns with this particular elevation with regard to the trash enclosure. However, that would be something that would have to be addressed in plans. The materials that have been presented for the trash enclosure are precast concrete to match the building in conformance with code. So turning now to the perspectives and renderings. We did receive lighting plans, though. Just want to quickly touch on those. Per code, all of the lighting fixtures are limited to a maximum of 5,000 kelvins in the areas that are industrial or commercial to industrial or commercial. In the locations where they are facing or abutting a residential zoning district, and there is a residential zoning district that's right across 13th Street, they're limited to a maximum of 3,500 kelvins. So essentially the parking that is along 13th Street, those lighting fixtures would be restricted to a maximum of 3,500 kelvins. On the east side, however, they could go up to 5,000. In any case, all fixtures must be full cutoff with the light source fully shielded and directed downward. Architectural accent wash, so any kind of building up lighting or down lighting, those would have to be, those would be limited to a maximum of 2,000 source lumens for those fixtures. There are wall packs that are proposed on the building. Those source lumens, those are required, those fixtures for the accent wash lighting. They're also required not to spill over roof lines or building edges, but these again are wall packs, so they're not going to be in violation of that. And finally, they cannot be mounted taller than the tallest point of the building. Where they've been proposed, they're kind of not necessarily the middle of the building, but I would say the upper middle portion of the building, so there's no concern there. We do have some engineering concerns that were raised in the staff report, and those are mainly to do with drainage. Roof drains are proposed directly to the wetlands, which is a concern. Those do not meet the protective area requirements, so that would have to be addressed and revised in new plans. In addition, the driveway entrances drain off-site undetained. Those must be accounted for in the drainage modeling, and water quality modeling indicates that roof drains are also going to be required. The outlet structures in the proposed stormwater pond, they must be a minimum of 3 inches per the engineering design manual, so they are currently undersized. And there is a maximum access to the detention pond for maintenance of 10:1. So those are going to be requirements that would have to be incorporated into revised plans as well. Going quickly through the perspectives and renderings, this is what the east side of the property would look like. And this is a view northwest looking south. You can see the existing office complex immediately to the north of this proposed building. This is looking west, looking at the west side of the building, looking east rather. And this is a rendering of the full facade of the west buildings, west elevation of the building facing 13th Street. We did speak a lot about the staff concerns, and because there are so many that would require quite extensive revisions to the plan, staff is currently recommending a hold on this item so that the applicant has sufficient time to incorporate those comments. However, if the Plan Commission wishes to proceed with this, there are several suggested conditions of approval if you wish to make that motion. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. This time, would the applicant like to come up or just wait on questions? Okay, Caitlin. Let's start with Chauncey.
I do have a question for the applicant.
Name and address, please.
Hi, Caitlin LaJoy, 3885 North Brookfield Road, Brookfield, Wisconsin, 53045.
So my questions are about different items. Yet I'll start with, a lot of these items are being addressed or need further investigation.
So we received about half of these comments on Thursday. Got our consultants teed up. They addressed what we could. We were getting ready to submit those plans on Friday, and then got the full staff report and realized that there's more comments that we still need to hash out with staff and include our consultants. To Carrie's point, we did submit the DNR application. We received comments from them today. We're addressing and responding to those. The DOT access approvals are also under review by DOT. So a lot of these are not shocking to us. We are working through them. It's just the approval process. Is there anything specific that you have a comment or question on?
A couple things. That's why I wanted to know if some of these things had been addressed already.
Yeah, so those ones are underway. Future
Okay.
parking,
Or
we
parking
don't
is too.
have any concerns there.
So parking has been looked at, or you need to look at it?
We're considering the future parking on the backside. That was a new one for us. As far as the fire department comments, there was a lot of discussion with our civil engineer just this evening, going back and forth, trying to address that. I believe they actually reached out to the fire chief to have that discussion about relocating the FDC. Landscape, our architect is already reviewing that, putting together a plan. As far as the mechanics, that will also be identified. Elevations, our architect is revising, looking at the different window suggestions, doing the warmer color palette, no issues there. The light source, the lighting plan has already been modified. We have not submitted that yet. We're going to wait until we have a full package to resubmit. And then the engineering comments are also being reviewed and addressed. So we recognize that today is maybe a moment for Plan Commission to provide feedback on the site plan, and we'll incorporate that for the resubmittal.
Okay. Yes, my questions were your comments on various items, but yet it sounds like a lot is still being looked at, so I'll wait to ask my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad?
Excuse me. I'm concerned about filling the wetlands. How are you coming with the DNR on that?
So we made the application about a month ago. We received comments just this morning, and it's not any surprising comments with the DNR. They've asked us to provide just alternate plans, what that potentially looks like, so we're working through that process, but every indication is that we'll have the wetland fill approved.
You have to relocate another area for the wetlands or something of that nature.
It would be a wetland fill permit, so there wouldn't be any mitigation for this one.
I really don't have any specific questions. Yeah, I think the hold is the way to go and try to eliminate 4 through 12 or 13 for the next time it comes through. Sounds like you're already looking into this stuff and working on it. I think I agree with the hold at this point.
I also agree with the hold. I mean, we've seen items like this where there was just so many not restrictions, conditions, sorry, thank you, listed, that it just makes sense to go back with staff and work through all of this before it comes back. So thank you.
Ashley?
And nothing further than what's included in the report.
Thank you.
Dawn?
Nope, I agree with all the comments.
Wetland, is there any way possible to avoid filling the wetland, especially with the 15-foot setback?
So we have it identified on our updated civil plans, which have not yet been submitted, to show that we are meeting that different requirement. But at this point, we've done everything we can to mitigate the square footage that we're filling. And so we have gotten it down to a general and not an individual permit. So that is a benefit there. But at this point, there is not a way to avoid filling.
Okay, all right, that's it for me.
Okay. No, I agree with the commissioners. There's a lot to go over. It's in the works, and I think we're gonna see this greatly reduced. It's all solvable. We'll get there. Just a timing issue. So hopefully, you know, if parties get it together, when's our last meeting? The 13th?
Yes, that's correct. December 13th is the last meeting of the year.
Quite a bit to go on. I guess my largest concern, I mean, we'll work through the permits and what has to be done, but really confer with fire. Again, you know, they kind of have a blank slate here. They don't know what kind of tenant they're going to encounter. They really need that access when they need that access. That's hugely important. So stay close with them for sure. Yes. I believe our last one is December 13th. Am I correct? We only got one more meeting this year?
The next meeting is November 22nd, but the last meeting of the year is December 13th.
Okay, losing track of my weeks here.
So we're anticipating to come back with our cleaned up plan for November 22nd.
Okay.
Got a little bit of work to do.
I didn't mean that sarcastically. I really, truly hope you make it.
Everybody in this project.
Well, you know, you
really
got the
done.
DNR. You're waiting on quite a few things. And
Yes.
you got some heavy hitters.
Yep. Definitely. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Motion on C then, 7C.
Clerk moves to hold item 7C until November 22nd meeting.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Greg.
Clark, aye.
Bukevich, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Grillo, aye. Shinsky, aye.
Okay, it's gonna get us to adjournment. Again, I hope all of you took advantage of your rights and went out there and voted and participated in our democracy. Upcoming, we have World Cup weekend going on in the square, and that is Black Friday, which is, somebody help me out with a date. When is it? The day after Thanksgiving. It's as good as I can get today.
November 25th.
November 25th in the square. There'll be a tent up and there'll be a watch party for the World Cup. So you'll get to watch teams such as Argentina, Ecuador, United States, and Mexico battle it out on a soccer field. Something new in Town Square. Come check it out. And again, Small Business Friday and Saturday. Get out there, support your local merchants. Remember, even the big guys started small at one time. So support them. And that'll get us to adjournment.
Grillo moves to adjourn at 7:04.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with me. Bukevich, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Grillo, aye. Shinsky, aye.
Clark, aye.
All right, good night, everybody.
Nice.